Today, we're going to talk about one of the most shocking events in the entire history of the transatlantic slave trade. It's the story of a ship called the Zong, and what happened on board forces us to confront a terrible question about a system that treated human beings as nothing more than property. So let's get into what really happened on this awful voyage.
But first, to really get this story, you have to start here. Just take a second and imagine it. Trapped in the dark, below deck. You can't see land. There is absolutely no escape. That feeling, that was the reality for millions of Africans who were forced into slavery.
You see, the story of the Zong didn't just happen out of nowhere. It was part of a much bigger, much more brutal system.
This journey had a name, the Middle Passage. It sounds so ordinary, doesn't it? But it was anything but. This was the horrifying trip across the Atlantic, from Africa to the Americas, a journey that could go on for months, and a journey that was designed to break people.
This right here, this shows us just how inhuman it was. As you can see in this diagram, people are packed in so tightly you can barely tell them apart. They were treated like cargo, not human beings. They were chained up, with hardly any air, food, or water. You can just imagine how quickly disease would have spread. This wasn't a trip. It was a system designed to strip people of their humanity before they even reached their destination.
Okay, so with that brutal reality in mind, let's zoom in on the Zong itself and see how this already horrific journey took an even darker turn.
So the journey starts on September 6th, 1781, and things are already bad. Within just 2 months, disease had killed dozens of enslaved people and even some of the crew. But the real crisis hits when the captain makes a huge mistake, a navigational error. They sail right past Jamaica, their destination. This mistake adds weeks to the voyage, and it puts a massive strain on their most precious resource, fresh water.
So let's just pause there. The ship is lost, people are dying, the water is running out. What do? A decision had to be made, and the choice the crew of the Zong made tells you everything you need to know about the twisted logic of the slave trade. Because the decision they came to, well, it wasn't about saving the most lives, it was about saving money.
And here's the cold calculation they made. You see, the enslaved people on board were insured, but they were insured like cargo, like barrels of fish or crates of wood. Now this meant that if they died from sickness on the ship, the owners lost money, simple as that. But if they were thrown overboard to save the ship in an emergency, well, that was different. Then the owners could file an insurance claim and get all their money back. It was literally a choice between a human life and a financial payout.
Now, you might be thinking, wait, was this normal? Did this happen all the time? And the answer is a clear no. This is what makes it so twisted. The rule for throwing cargo overboard, jettisoning it, was meant for actual goods. Stuff. Using this rule on people was unusual and deeply shocking. When the public eventually found out, many people were horrified.
So, faced with this cold financial logic, the captain and crew made a monstrous choice.
Over the course of several days, they threw at least 133 enslaved Africans overboard into the sea to drown.
As you can see in this image, this was a deliberate, violent act. They weren't just picking the sick. In some cases, people were chained together. This was a calculated massacre, carried out for one reason: to turn a human tragedy into a financial gain.
And here is the fact that just blows their whole story apart. After the killings, it rained, which gave them more water. So when the Zong finally pulled into Jamaica, there were over 400 gallons of fresh water left on board. The life or death emergency they claimed to be in, it wasn't real.
And that discovery forces us to ask the real question, doesn't it? With all that water left, was this really a last resort to save everyone on the ship? Or was it just a flimsy excuse to cash in on an insurance policy?
You'd think the story ends there, but the horror didn't stop when the ship reached land. The story takes its final, shocking twist in a British courtroom. That's right. The owners of the Zong didn't face a murder trial. Instead, they took the insurance company to court because it refused to pay out their claim. The legal battle that happened next was about property and profit, not about the 133 human lives that were just gone.
Just try to imagine being in that courtroom. This case was argued like a business problem. The whole discussion was about whether the crew's actions were necessity, according to the insurance policy. The victims, the people who were murdered, were just called cargo. Their humanity was completely erased from the conversation. The system itself saw them as property and nothing more.
But the story wasn't just buried in some legal document. An abolitionist named Granville Sharp heard about the trial.
He was appalled and called it what it was: mass murder. He fought to get the crew prosecuted for their crimes. Now, he didn't succeed in court, but his campaign dragged the story of the Zong into the light. It became this powerful, undeniable example of the sheer cruelty of the slave trade, and it fueled the fight to end it for good.
And this is the most crucial point to take away. While the Zong massacre was an extreme, unusual event, it revealed the fundamental truth of the entire system. It showed that, when pushed, the logic of the slave trade could justify mass murder for profit, because it had already stripped people of their humanity in the eyes of the law.
So, the story of the Zong leaves us with one final, unavoidable question. When you turn human beings into property, valuing them only by what they're worth in cash, was this horrific act a desperate choice for survival, or was it just business?